What can I even say about Ocarina of Time? Like, legitimately, what can I say? Ocarina of Time is one of the most discussed video games on this platform, likely alongside Super Mario 64 and, I don't know, Minecraft. And yet, this game makes me nervous in a way that the other ones don't, and that's because of what this game represents. If you know anything about the Zelda timeline at all, you know that Ocarina of Time creates the split timeline that defines the shape of this franchise's lore. It's been at the center of years of debate, which I am finally, after almost 4 years of covering Zelda on this channel, stepping into. I'm going to open up with discussing the story of the game itself, and move on to the wider timeline discussion after. If that's more of what you're interested in, check out the timestamps in the description to skip ahead. But for those of you here for the whole video, let's step into the lore of 1998's Ocarina of Time. Also, like most of my videos, I'm focusing on the most recent remake, in this case being Ocarina of Time 3D on the 3DS. The differences aren't huge for the most part, and if you've only played the original Ocarina of Time, then you'll be fine. But it's always worth mentioning it. If you have, for some reason, never played Ocarina of Time, it's most easily available in its original form on Nintendo Switch Online. The first events described in this game are the Triforce origin story. Many elements of this are taken from the version described in Link to the Past, but we're given much more detail here, so we'll go over it again. Long ago, there was nothing but chaos, until such time that the three golden goddesses, Din, Nehru, and Farour, entered that chaos and created the world as we know it. Din, goddess of power, used her strong fiery arms to craft the Red Earth. Nehru, goddess of wisdom, poured forth her wisdom, giving the spirit of law to the world. Then Farour, goddess of courage, created the life forms who would inhabit Din's land and follow Nehru's laws. And, with their job done, the three departed from the land that would come to be known as Hyrule, leaving behind an artifact that would allow for their power to remain in this new world, the Triforce. This power could only be used by a person with the heart balanced between the three virtues the goddesses represented: power, wisdom, and courage. However, the Triforce itself had no sense of morality, and could be used for either good or evil purposes. The Master Sword, the Blade of Evil's Bane, would be created later as a way to protect the Triforce from those of malintent. The area the Triforce is left in would come to be known as the Sacred Realm. The ancient Hylians built the Temple of Time around the entrance to the Sacred Realm in order to protect it. The door to the Sacred Realm, known as the Door of Time, would be left locked, able to be opened only by 4 artifacts that would be spread among the 4 tribes that lived in Hyrule. These are the Kokiri Emerald, the Goron's Ruby, and the Zora's Sapphire, the spiritual stones of the forest, fire, and water, respectively, and the Ocarina of Time, an enchanted instrument that wields power over the flow of time itself. Now let's talk about those 4 races. First, we have the Kokiri of the forest. The Kokiri are a race of Fey-like humanoids, the creations and subjects of the Great Deku Tree, an ancient and powerful guardian spirit. The Kokiri themselves took on the form of human children, never growing or aging. However, they were also unable to leave the forest for long periods of time, for their own protection. Each Kokiri would also be paired with a fairy for guidance and protection. At the time of the game, the quote-unquote boss of the Kokiri was a boy named Mido. Next we have the Gorons of Death Mountain, a race of easygoing, rock-like geovores with an affinity for explosives. In the long past, this tribe was threatened by the dragon Volvagia, who would be slain by one of their leaders. The descendant of this great hero, named Darunia, served as the chief of the Gorons during the events of the game. He was also closely aligned with the Hylian royal family, being a sworn brother of their king. The third gem was left with the Zora, a fish-like race of people who live in Zora's domain, the only apparent source of fresh water in Hyrule. Despite the design change, they're still related to the Zora, also known as the Zola in early material, that have existed in the series since the first game. They venerate the guardian spirit known as Lord Jabu Jabu, who takes on the form of a fish or whale-like creature. Their king is known as King Zora the 16th. He also has a daughter and heir in Princess Ruto. Finally, the Ocarina of Time and the accompanying tune, the Song of Time, would remain a closely guarded secret of the Hylian royal family, which of course included the girl by the name of Princess Zelda. Though once again, this is a distinct Zelda from any of the ones we've seen before. Zelda is shown in this game to have prophetic and telepathic powers, similar to what was displayed by the Princess Zelda we met in A Link to the Past. The Hylians mostly live in Castletown, a large urban center surrounding the Temple of Time and the castle that houses the Hyrulean royal family. It's also worth noting that this is a different race of people than we've seen in the previous games. The various characters in Zelda 1, A Link to the Past, and their sequels are stated to be humans, descended from but also contrasted with the ancient Hylian people, which we finally see for the first time in this game. There were also two races that were not included in this seeming alliance, the first of which is the Sheikah. Their aesthetic is very heavily based on ninjas, and their traditional home was Kakariko Village at the base of Death Mountain. However, they're very rare at this point in time, and it's widely believed that they've pretty much died out, though we do meet more Sheikah later in the timeline, implying that they managed to keep their numbers steady somehow. The only explicitly Sheikah person that we meet in this game is Impa, Princess Zelda's nursemaid and the leader of Kakariko Village. The final tribe, and the most relevant to our story, is the Gerudo, a tribe of desert-dwelling warrior women to whom only one male is born every 100 years. This one male then becomes their king. Their current king is a man named Ganondorf, whose name should set off some alarm bells for you. It was Ganondorf's desire to seize control of the Triforce and gain the power of the gods. This desire for power completely ruled his heart. However, when he approached the various tribes, they were unwilling to give him their keys to the Door of Time, leaving the despotic king with no choice but to resort to trickery. Ganondorf also had latent evil burning inside him, due to being the reincarnation of an ancient demon king. It's worth mentioning here, but the lineage of demise is better discussed in my eventual Skyward Sword video. In the past, it appears the Gerudo worship some sort of goddess of sand, as seen in the Desert Colossus, but the Gossip Stones, which share rumors whispered among the people of Hyrule, say that they now worship Ganondorf instead. Ganondorf has taken a particularly dictatorial leadership style with his people. Any detractors, such as the nonconformist thief Nabooru, will be dealt with by Ganondorf's mothers, the witches known as Twinrova, who had brainwashed them into becoming powerful armored soldiers known as Iron Knuckles. Sometime before the events of the game, a civil war broke out in Hyrule. We don't know a lot about that war, but it's been a topic of debate for many years, and is more than worth its own video. It's often believed to be what caused the massacre of the Sheikah race, and may serve as the reason why Ganondorf eventually swears fealty to the King of Hyrule. Even a decade after the end of the war, the Gerudo are often looked on with suspicion throughout Hyrule. One concrete fact that we do know, however, is that during the war, a Hylian woman escaped a battle, mortally wounded and carrying a baby boy. She stumbled into the Kokiri forest, where she found the Deku Tree. While the tree could not save her life, he did agree to put the child into the care of the Kokiri. This child would go on to be named Link, and was raised believing himself to be Kokiri through and through. His best friend was a girl by the name of Saria. When Link was somewhere around 10 years old, Ganondorf finally made his move. He inflicted a curse onto each of the 3 tribes holding the sacred gemstones. He set parasitic demons upon Jabu Jabu and the Deku Tree, and, without a guardian deity to infect for the Goron, instead left an infestation of Dodongo, a variety of fire-breathing lizard, inside their feeding grounds, causing the Gorons to starve. He also placed a large rock in front of the entrance to block them off further. He knew that the tribes would never give up the gemstone willingly, but he was playing the long game. Either they would give their stones to him, or instead gather the stones and open the Door of Time out of fear of what was coming. Knowing his death was inevitable, the Deku Tree decided that it was time to call on Link, a boy he knew to have a great destiny. He bade the child to slay the parasitic armored arachnid, Goma, that had taken up nest within its roots, pulling the boy on the path to becoming a hero. With his dying breaths, I guess? I don't know what you say for a tree. The Deku Tree gave Link the Sacred Emerald, telling the young hero to find the Princess of Hyrule. He and Princess Zelda met in the castle courtyard, where she shared with Link her prophetic dreams, of a dark cloud threatening Hyrule, and a hero clad in green who would save it. While it was clear that the hero was Link, Zelda was sure that the clouds were representative of Ganondorf, who was currently visiting the castle. And of course, there was nothing this power-hungry king could want more than the Triforce. She and Link then agreed to collect the remaining spiritual stones in order to keep the keys to the Door of Time safe. While Zelda kept an eye on Ganondorf during his stay in Castletown, Link left to collect the remaining 2 spiritual stones. In doing so, he not only became sworn brothers to Daruni of the Gorons, but accidentally wound up engaged to Princess Ruto of the Zora, sealing relationships with both races that would outlast the bonds of time. During this time, Link was also watched over by a large owl by the name of Kapora Gabora. The Gossip Stones believe that he is a reincarnation of an ancient sage, that sage likely being a man named Gapora, who served as a mentor to the hero of Sky in the long ago age, as well as the father to that era's Zelda. The moment Ganondorf learned that Link had received the third spiritual stone, he set his plan into motion, lodging an attack on Castletown. Very quickly, the guards were slaughtered and the castle fell, forcing Zelda and Impa to escape the city in order for the princess to live. The two saw Link just as they left, and Zelda tossed him the Ocarina of Time, the final piece of the key. When he touched the instrument, a vision appeared to Link, a telepathic message attached to the artifact by Zelda, who explained its importance as well as taught him the Song of Time. When played in the Temple of Time in the presence of the three spiritual stones, the door opened, revealing the final lock, the Master Sword, the Blade of Evil's Bane. Created long ago with the intention of acting as a moral compass for the Triforce, it could only be wielded by one who followed the morality bestowed by the three goddesses. Even if Ganondorf had managed to find the three spiritual stones and the Ocarina of Time, and learn the Song of Time, he would never be able to remove the sword, as it could not be wielded by those it deemed unworthy. But when Link touched the sword and removed it from its pedestal, undoing the final lock on the Sacred Realm and the Triforce, that protective lock was removed. The sword, sensing Link was not yet physically capable of becoming the great hero he was destined to be, put the boy into a magical slumber within the Sacred Realm, where he would remain for 7 years. And without anyone left to protect the entrance to the Sacred Realm, Ganondorf had won. With the door now wide open for him, Ganondorf entered the Temple of Time and touched the Triforce, greedy for its power. However, his soul was imbalanced, desiring power over anything else, and the Triforce was unable to latch onto him fully. While Ganondorf retained the Triforce of power, the other pieces of the Triforce found different wielders. According to the Japanese script, the goddesses themselves apparently chose the three wielders of the Triforce. Despite only carrying 1/3 of the golden power, Ganondorf's strength still increased dramatically. He took on the title of Demon King, one long destined to him through the power of reincarnation. Now, possessing the power of the gods, he turned Castletown into a desolate ruin full of shambling corpses, causing those who remained in the city to flee, mostly to Kakariko village. In the intervening years, Ganondorf's influence would only grow. Knowing the power of the other races, and maybe fearing the rise of the Seven Sages, Ganondorf would lash out against all the other races. The Kakiri Forest, no longer protected by the Deku Tree, was swarmed by monsters. He attacked Goron City, kidnapping the entire populace with the exception of Darunia and his young son, in order to serve as food for a revived Volvagia. He also left behind a couple of shopkeepers, but they're not particularly important. Ganondorf froze over Lake Hylia in Zora's domain, as well as the entire Zora race. As for the Hylians in Kakariko, he would also summon the spirit of Bongo Bongo, an evil shadow spirit long sealed in a dungeon beneath the village as well. Ganondorf also seeks control of the 5 temples scattered throughout Hyrule, in order to keep the servants of the goddesses from dampening his plans. His evil also seeped into the Sacred Realm itself, corrupting that holy place into an evil realm, akin to the one seen in A Link to the Past. Over that time, knowing that her life was in constant danger, Impa kept Zelda in hiding. She trained her young ward in the ways of the Sheikah, and the princess took on a new identity, that of the bard known as Sheik. Sheik would carry a harp, one that had been carried down her family line since the founding of Hyrule itself, which served as the only clue to her true identity. And it is this world that Link finally returned to. He awakened in the Temple of Light, a location within the Sacred Realm that was home to Rauru, the Sage of Light. Rauru explained the time skip to Link, and told him that the only way to defeat Ganondorf at this point was to awaken the rest of the 7 sages. I mentioned them slightly earlier, but the sages are servants of the goddesses who were fated to protect the Sacred Realm and the artifacts of the goddesses. In many games, these powers include giving power to the Master Sword, and sealing away great evil. These sages are implied to have the same power as the 7 sages mentioned in the Manual of Link to the Past, as well as the 7 maidens descended from them. However, due to Ganondorf's influence, the 7 sages of this era were unable to awaken with the exception of Rauru, who likely had already awoken prior to the events of this game, and one more sage who we'll get into later. With his new quest in hand, Link set out to free the remaining sages, all of whom he'd met as a child. His best friend Saria, his sworn brother Darunia, his betrothed Rudo, Zelda's nursemaid Impa, and the thief Nabooru. Okay, meeting Nabooru first as a child is only a technicality of time travel, but I'm not going to go into detail on that here. Once all 6 sages were awakened, Sheik revealed themselves as Zelda, the 7th and final sage, the Sage of Time. Immediately after, however, Ganondorf, who'd been keeping watch of Link from afar, used his magic to capture Zelda in a pink crystallic prison, similar to the ones the 7 maidens in Link to the Past were found inside. With the princesses, and thus the second piece of the Triforce, now in Ganondorf's possession, Link chased the Demon King to the tower he now called home, an imposing structure built on the ruins of what was once Hyrule Castle. Atop this tower, Link finally confronted the Gerudo head-on. With all 3 Triforce wielders now in one room, the parts began to react, desiring to be brought back together. Ganondorf and Link began to fight, each hoping to remove the other from the equation. However, despite all of the power Ganondorf gained from the Triforce, Link still struck him down. As a consequence of this clash between 2 of the strongest combatants in Hyrule, the tower began to collapse. Link and Zelda only barely made it out in time. When the tower was not but ruins, and the area lay still, the 2 were surprised to find Ganondorf, still alive, kept from death only by the piece of the Triforce and a burning hatred. In a last-ditch effort to clinch the victory, the Triforce awakened Ganondorf's innate demonic ability, transforming him into the powerful pig beast known as Ganon. But even this form couldn't bring the Gerudo King victory, and when he was weakened enough by the Master Sword and the Light Arrows, an incarnation of Hylia's golden energy wielded by Zelda, the sages managed to seal Ganondorf within the Sacred Realm. While being sealed, he returned to his natural form of Ganondorf, swearing vengeance on Zelda, the sages, and all of Hyrule. With Ganondorf defeated, Zelda returned Link to the past, where he would reclaim his lost childhood in a world free of Ganondorf's influence. He awakened way back in time before he met Zelda, but likely after he defeated Goma and received the Kokiri Emerald. But, despite once again having control over his own life, Link still had one more thing he needed to do. He visited Zelda once again, much like he had done before. This time, however, instead of listening to her prophecy, Link told her, as well as the King of Hyrule, what he knew of Ganondorf's treachery. Likely he could prove his story by showing that he still held the Triforce of Courage from his time in the future. With this, Ganondorf was instead imprisoned and sentenced to execution, and the future was changed. This event, Link exposing Ganondorf's plot before he could claim the Triforce of Power, created 2 alternate timelines, often referred to in the community as the Split Timeline. The world Link created would lead to games like Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess, and the consequences of changing history would be explored. On the other hand, the original timeline, the one where Ganondorf was sealed in the Evil Realm, still existed. This world would go on to have its own future, one where Ganondorf would escape from his prison, leading to the goddesses flooding the world and the birth of a new hero. The split timeline is one of the most important parts of the Zelda continuity, and is very explicitly referenced in the games, with both features becoming backstories for different titles. There is one more feature to mention, however. In 2012, in celebration of Zelda's 25th anniversary, Nintendo released the Hyrule Historia, the first official material to come with the Zelda timeline. This timeline gave us yet another feature, one where Link died fighting Ganondorf, and, although the Demon King was still sealed, he managed to obtain the rest of the Triforce from Link and Zelda, and Hyrule fell away from the goddesses, creating the world of A Link to the Past. This is referred to as the Downfall timeline. Personally, however, I don't believe Hyrule Historia to be canon. There are a number of reasons for this. For one, the timeline had been retconned a number of times by later games and books, showing the timeline in that book was not the heavily fortified document held sacred by the development team. It also contains a large amount of incorrect information that blatantly conflicts with what is shown in the games. Finally, the book was not written by the game's developers, but instead writers at Shogakukan, Nintendo Dream, and other third-party companies. The only actual member of the development team listed to be on staff is series producer Eiji Aonuma, who had admitted that he himself did not edit the book, instead crediting most of its contents to fans of the series who worked on it. This definitely deserves its own discussion separate from Ocarina of Time for now, but there's no way I can talk about Ocarina of Time and the split timeline without making my stance on the Downfall timeline very clear. I may or may not make a separate video on the topic in the future, but even if I do, I highly suggest checking out the one already made by friend of the channel, YimCan64. I think that his video, is the best compendium of information on the history of the Zelda canon, both including Hyrule Historia and other elements of the overarching narrative. Yim and I share a lot of our personal beliefs about the Zelda series, so I'd say that a lot of what he says is reminiscent of my own stance. Now, it may be possible that you disagree with me, and still believe Hyrule Historia to be canon, and that's fine. This is a fictional piece of media that only exists insofar as our beliefs and understanding of it goes. There's nothing wrong with believing differently than me, and anyone who watches my videos is welcome to believe whatever they want. This is simply my personal stance on the book, and the perspective from which these videos are being written. If you want to have a conversation about this, you're more than welcome to post a comment and debate there, or join my Discord server, link in the description. I'll discuss where I would rather put Link to the Past in a second, but there are a few other things that I want to discuss about this game first. We need to talk briefly about the Skull Kid. While he would go on to become the antagonist of Majora's Mask, he was first introduced here. Skull Kids are a type of forest spirit created when a child enters the Lost Woods and loses themselves there. They become a creature of the forest, with a body crafted of wood. The same thing happens to adults, though they instead become Stalfos, likely because of the link between forest and the undead that is so heavy in this series. Developer interviews have said that this never happened to Link, because he was still raised as a Kokiri, and thus belongs to the forest, even despite being Hylian. One particular Skull Kid is somewhat of a loner, and isn't accepted by his peers. He gains confidence with Link, acting as a salesman for the Happy Mask shop in Hyrule Castle Town, sells the Skull Kid a mask that makes him look intimidating. This event begins the Skull Kid's interest in masks, and goes on to lead to the inciting incident of the game's sequel, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. The Happy Mask salesman, owner of the shop, also returns in this game, but we'll discuss him in more detail in that video. The concept of the Goddess of Sand also interests me a lot, being another god who is not one of the Trinity worshipped by the Hylians. The whole Gerudo culture just seems to be so disconnected from the rest of Hyrule. It's something else that I would like to explore further in future games, especially after we explore the desert more in Twilight Princess, Four Swords Adventures, and Breath of the Wild. Now for the timeline. It's no secret that Ocarina of Time, at its inception, was made to draw parallels to the backstory of A Link to the Past. The developers have gone on record saying that this game was originally meant to be exploring the Sealing War, a conflict in the history of Link to the Past that left Ganon trapped in the Sacred Realm. Many people still say that the game serves to show the earlier events of that backstory directly, often citing the Historia. However, I can't say that I agree. If we look at the Sealing War as is described in Link to the Past, we can see some similarities. Both sets of events involve Ganondorf taking the Triforce, corrupting the Sacred Realm, and then getting sealed there. However, none of the other details seem to line up. According to the Japanese version of the A Link to the Past manual, the door to the Sacred Realm was found accidentally by a band of thieves led by Ganondorf. While Ganondorf could be said to lead a band of thieves, as the king of the Gerudo, the discovery was in no way an accident. The entrance to the Sacred Realm was already known in this time period, being in the middle of Castletown. The door itself wasn't even opened by Ganondorf and his crew, but instead Link. In A Link to the Past, discovering the Sacred Realm and the Triforce caused the power-hungry thieves to fight among themselves, until the only one who remained to claim the prize was Ganondorf himself. The only Gerudo in Ocarina of Time who ever fought against Ganondorf's interests was Nabooru, who certainly didn't want the Triforce for herself, and the rest of the Gerudo certainly weren't slaughtered in the adult timeline. If anything, despite being more militant, the future-era Gerudo seemed to be quite well off. In the original manual for A Link to the Past, it was stated that Ganondorf often went by the nickname Ganon, and was more widely known under that moniker than by his proper name. Compare that to Ocarina of Time, where he was referred to as Ganondorf throughout, and only becomes known as Ganon when he takes on his demonic form during the final boss fight. Once again, Ocarina of Time fails to line up with anything we know from the A Link to the Past manual. The Ganon in A Link to the Past is also implied to have a balanced heart, as when he touched the Triforce, it became his in its entirety. Compare this again to Ocarina of Time, where Ganondorf's heart was explicitly unbalanced, and he needed to work to reform the Triforce in order to claim it. With how much Ganondorf's backstory differs between the two games, I find it hard to believe that these events are supposed to line up at all. If the different histories of Ganondorf don't work together, then we need to come to an alternative conclusion. This Ganondorf and the one in Link to the Past may share the same name and may share the same fate, but they are not the same man. Sure, they are likely reincarnations of the same being, but Ganondorf needs to be reborn before the events before A Link to the Past can even begin to occur. much like Link needs to be reborn before the hero of Twilight can leave Orden Village. Looking at the timeline, the placement of Ocarina of Time itself is fairly straightforward. In A Link to the Past, it was stated that the land of Hyrule had fallen from the gods, while in this game, the Hylians still have the high, pointed ears that supposedly symbolize their connection to the gods above. Hyrule in this period has not yet fallen. The inclusion of the Seven Sages, and also Mido, who become the namesakes of the cities found in Zelda 2, also implies that this game predates that one as well. To a more structural point, Ocarina of Time serves as a major branching point that leads into most of the other games in the series. And with that, the real question we should be asking is instead, into which timeline do we place A Link to the Past? I'll wind up settling with the child timeline, mostly due to connections with later games that I will also move to this timeline, including Four Swords Adventures. The exact reasoning for this placement will be made clearer over time as I discuss the games that fill up that gap. This video has been one that I've been nervous about making for years at this point, as I feel like this is the real start of our discussion of Zelda lore. I hope the video I wound up putting out properly explains my points and beliefs, and even if you don't agree with me, I hope you still enjoyed yourselves. And with that, I think I need a break before my next Zelda video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.